Welcome to the third installment of Conversations and Culture Shifters presented by Culture Shift Labs. I am your moderator for today, Nancy Douillon, and I am also an alumni, I guess you could say, and former speaker at the Culture Shift Weekends. I shared a story about how I went from homelessness to human factors engineer and then leading global design at places like Google and Uber, IBM and Intel. And I now run a consultancy primarily focused on helping enterprises learn how to create measurable culture shifts within their own products. I personally ended up working on launches that have covered over 80 countries globally and many products which many of you have actually been able to use. And I'm part of the culture shifting community, and I'm honored to be the moderator for tonight's important conversation. In this new monthly series, we will be talking to leaders and luminaries, icons and influencers, artists and activists, and other examples of excellence in our community. In the past Culture Shift Labs, we would host these conversations exclusively during our Culture Shift weekends, but since the events of 2020 forced us all indoors, we wanted to find more meaningful ways to engage with all of you, and therefore we've decided to open these up to a broader audience. So we're tackling racial equity head on while still emphasizing connection to information and opportunities, most importantly to each other. So please be sure to use the chat feature to meet new people. The more spirited you are, the better. I've actually won some money hanging out in chat, so you never know. We know that thoughtful insights paired with connections and collaborations lead to improved business and society. And so with that, let's start by introducing our special guest for today. And I'm going to start by introducing Rick Willard. So Rick is the founder of Agentic. It's a global community of technologists, philosophers, ethicists, entrepreneurs, authors, investors, nonprofits, and executives who are developing and curating digital products for inclusion, value creation, and eco-sustainability. And then we have Olinka Odeneran. Hopefully I said that right. She's the founder and chairwoman of Black Women Blockchain Council. It's a benefit LLC that promotes Black women in fintech, blockchain, and future technologies. And so I've kind of given a little bit of an introduction to both of you, but let's start with just asking straight away, what do you want people to walk away with today? Let's start with Rick.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. I would like to listen to understand that we talk about blockchain and we talk about digital tokens. What we're really talking about is a seismic shift in how we calibrate and how we understand really top-level issues like value creation, like the philosophy of money. When you are spending a US dollar, you're buying into a certain philosophy. That's a consumerist philosophy. And it has certain things attached to it. You might say colonialism, you might say other things. And when you're building digital currencies off of a blockchain, you are also espousing certain philosophies. You're also, there are, in fact, and I've said this to Andrea and other groups in Culture Shift, digital currencies like that in Orania in South Africa, which are white separatist digital currencies. So you have, money is always a philosophy, and it's tied very heavily to values. So when we talk about what values we as a people have moving forward in the 21st century, and this opportunity drops into our laps to say, create your own value. Okay, now you're on the same level. You're on a level playing field technologically with people like Olinka and others to get us there. Now, what are you going to do? Now it's time to espouse, create, monetize our own value. And so I'd like people to come away with that kind of thinking.
I completely agree with you and appreciate your insight on that. And I'd love to hear from you, Olinka. Pardon. What do you want people to walk away from today?
Well, I agree with Rick. I think people need to walk away with the value of this new technology, blockchain, as well as the different use cases of blockchain. A lot of us are exposed to cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin, because of the increase in pricing. However, there's other means or value that Bitcoin has besides the store of value or the monetization of Bitcoin. And so I would like people to walk away with knowing that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies serve a greater purpose in our life and going forward. And also realize that this is not a phenomenon that's just here to stay. It's the way that we're going to do business going forward. So it's like an opening or the revolution of our future.
Well, to carry from where you're speaking, can you tell me a little bit about why you think there is a need for diversity in blockchain?
Oh, that's a great question. We're in a decade now where we're realizing that there's value in diversity, there's value in inclusion, and making sure that people are included allows us to move forward. And giving that blockchain, the technology is a path for us to bridge a new future for ourselves. I think it's important for everyone to be involved. When I first got introduced into this community, I realized that it wasn't just one sector or one group of people or one country. It became an open door to the global world, right? I was able to communicate with people in Tokyo, people in Africa, people in South Africa. So there's no containment of this phenomenon. So I wanted to make sure that Black women, and particularly the Black community, is included in creating what we see as the future, or the landscape for the future.
That is absolutely beautiful. And of course, Black women leading in these spaces again. You know, Rick, I'd like to learn a little bit more from you. Maybe you can tell me about what the implications of what you might be able to explain information permanence is.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So blockchains, part of what makes blockchains special, if they're decentralized, is a permanence of record. It essentially is tamper-proof, and it authenticates an object or a thing. So if you have a document, let's say, on a blockchain, the reason to put it on a blockchain is because people can't hack into it and can't change it. It's there permanently, so there's a permanence involved within the technology itself. Now, the good part about that is that if done correctly, it is permanent and it's a record of transactions moving forward, or authenticity, identification, all kinds of different sidebars can be attributed to that. But if you put in bad information, then you have bad information forever. So there is an issue of permanence that, and that goes back. I tie everything back to values. What kind of organization? What kind of community are you? Are you working in good faith? Can we trust people to work in good faith? When we first started this whole blockchain thing in about 2013, we used to call them trustless contracts. Mm-hmm. You didn't need trust in order to verify information. Mm-hmm. It turns out, though, you need trust inputting the information, right? Just like a child. If a small Black child goes to school in rural Texas, they may never know, who Benjamin Banneker was, right? It depends on what information you put into that pipeline. So we're going to see a push societally all over the world, because this is the basis, as Odienka said, for the technologies moving forward. This is version 1.0 of trustless technology. Okay, we'll have better, more formal iterations as it goes forward. But blockchain is the beginning of that movement. So you have to go back now to the values that you're inputting into the system to guarantee positive outputs.
Maybe you can carry on and talk about a little bit of that. There's a bit of mistrust, right? And I think that folks want to know if this is going to be permanent. Can this be gamed? Is there like a negative impact to getting involved in this? Sure.
Okay, so let's say Bitcoin and the Bitcoin blockchain. Forget the currency for a second. The Bitcoin blockchain is a mined blockchain. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means, it's a group of computer enthusiasts around the world created Bitcoin by using computing power to answer a riddle, essentially a mathematical riddle. And the first person to solve it, the first computer to solve it, is awarded those Bitcoins. Now, what that does, each time that riddle is solved, that's called a block, by the way, where those Bitcoins are attributed to the winner of that contest. And then there's a chain of blocks. So now you have a blockchain, right? So the next riddle, then the next riddle, then the next riddle, right? So as those are solved, the chain becomes harder and harder and harder. So it gets more and more impenetrable the more transactions are put onto that blockchain. So can it be gamed? Well, there's something called a 51% attack. And if you own 51% of those transactions, you own the voting power for the blockchain. So you can change that blockchain at any point you want to, or cleave off, or what we call fork, sections of that blockchain to represent different things, and actually change the tide of that information input, right? So can it be gamed? The answer is yes. And if you look at Bitcoin, you have to look at where most of it is mined. And I'm just talking about Bitcoin right this second. I mean, there are other variants of blockchains, other flavors of tokens and whatnot. But most of the Bitcoin in the world is mined probably in Asia right now, right? So you could conceivably argue that Asia controls Bitcoin. Now, do they, on the markets? Well, you might argue that American markets really control Bitcoin, but that would not be provable really. But what you can say is that whoever owns 51% of any decentralized blockchain de facto owns that blockchain.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, Olinka, do you think that this could be helpful for folks who are unbanked? People already don't trust banks and they're not making much back from them. But what do you have to say around how blockchain affects the unbanked?
Well, so that's a good question. And let's take Bitcoin, for instance. Bitcoin is decentralized, and decentralized means that there's no one controlling party that governs Bitcoin. So there's no way to manipulate the pricing. Even though I know people are going to push back on me, Elon Musk like to tweet out like he can control the pricing of Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. There's no one individual. And I don't like the fact that, you know, when you hear him say something, it's all of a sudden attributed to him, the price fluctuation. But there's no one individual, no one central governing party that controls it. And because of that, it allows any type of individual to gain access to it. When people think about the unbanked, they automatically think about Africa or South America, or places where, you know, that are deemed third or second world countries. But however, even in the US, we do have individuals who are unbanked. And unbanked basically means these individuals do not have access to, you know, financial institutions. They don't have bank accounts. They rather store their money underneath their mattress or at home or whatever, for various reasons. And so these individuals, they do have cell phones. And because of blockchain, they're able to use cryptocurrencies because it's on the internet, right? So they're able to use cryptocurrencies and purchase and do transactions with anybody throughout the world. So I believe that you know, the technology, along with where we are in this era where we're moving towards technology, we've created a presence online, and everyone who has access to online communication also has access to purchasing, doing transactions with digital currencies like the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. So I do believe that this is a great way of paving financial freedom for the unbanked, because now they're looking at you know, their money being able to be moved without a centralized individual. They don't have to take their money into a financial institution. And at the same time, going to Africa, I'm Nigerian. So recently the Nigerian government, the Central Bank of Nigeria has put out a statement that their tactic going forward was to prevent the citizens from actually being able to do transactions in crypto, owning crypto, et cetera. If they have a bank account that, you know, cryptos are sent into, they basically blocked all that. And even with that, people are still trading crypto because it doesn't have to be stored in a financial institution. As long as you have access to the internet, you can still own your cryptocurrencies. And so it's creating kind of like a social justice movement for a lot of people, as well as being a really good use cases for those individuals who just do not have any means or access to go to the bank or don't even trust the banks. And so this is their way, this is kind of like their freedom, their financial freedom of doing transactions and moving with the general, the rest of the world. The other good thing about Bitcoin is the fact that it's traded globally. So when we tap into the unbanked, now they're just open up the entire world to them, because now if they gain access to Bitcoin, now they're trading with other people around the world. And, it's also good that the price is going up, or at least, steadily fluctuating upwards. And it's a store of value as well as, to some people, it's an investment vehicle.
I'm gonna come back to you about this disruption, because we're gonna get into detail about like how disruptive can this really be. But Rick, maybe you can kind of chime in here. What are some of these emerging mass market adoption strategies for tokens? I've been hearing there's so many opportunities apart from kind of the general knowledge that we have with blockchain, but there's a lot of things that we can do with it.
Yeah, I want to address that. I want to take one half a step back and just tail on to what Olenka said, because what she said is very important and it's all very true. But if you look at the idea of control, okay, control happens at the source. What is the source for digital technology? They are ISPs and phone companies. Okay, so you can conceivably say that phone companies are more important than banks in this movement, and that phone companies are the banks of the future. Now, there is a movement in Latin America and in Africa to have majority ownership of the phone companies for this very reason. Heretofore, there have been European companies or American companies coming in and owning Safaricom, Orange, Vodafone, those kinds of companies, AT&T, branded locally, but still going back to, again, extracting value from these continents and plopping it down into Europe or America.
Yeah.
So the same kind of thing is at risk. And so you have these cascading effects from this sort of value shift, right? I don't mean to play on culture shift, but it's a value shift as well, where ownership becomes more important if you are to move in this space moving forward. Or else it's just like, you might as well just, give your transaction fees to Europe, mail them on to Paris or whatever you're going to do. So that being said, to your next question, the actual question that you asked me, mass adoption has always been a difficult thing for these concepts, right? Let's say blockchain in corporate and in governance is actually gaining a lot of traction. So supply chain, energy, ports with bills of lading and all kinds of different things are actually being deployed right now. We actually consulted with the Port of Rotterdam for a significant amount of time to help their port understand, how blockchain to make their port operations more efficient. And we've consulted with the country of Luxembourg to tie all of their IoT initiatives together through blockchain. But the mass adoption and I'll talk now about the token side, the economic side, that freedom side, is coming in some really interesting places. There is a company that I began working with a little while ago that all they do is a company that signs up people for checking accounts. It's the people to the unbanked that Olenka was talking about, or the underbanked, people who don't have checking accounts. Now, you'd be surprised how many people don't have checking accounts. That's why check cashers stay in business, right? Because a lot of people, there are millions and millions and millions of people do not have checking accounts. So this company's goal is to onboard people into checking accounts in the community banks and credit unions, right? So now we're working with them to put a crypto wallet into that financial bundle for them. So they're churning 2,000 people a week, rather converting 2,000 people a week into a greater financial independence, adding that layer of value, which is digital value, on top of that, now brings people into the fold who literally did not know how to manage a checking account previously. And you have to instruct people how to do it. There are video instructions, all kinds of different things, how to manage a wallet. All of these now are becoming mainstream so that people can be a part of what's going on here. Because without the mass of people adopting it, it just remains with the technocrats. It just remains with people who already have means. And that's great. You know, we could all make a couple of bucks and that's wonderful for us, but we were doing that anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, it's really more about getting people to wrap their heads around what this truly means and getting communities to wrap their heads around what this truly means. Enable themselves to get out of the extractive cycle of finance and economies into the extrusive cycle, we call value extrusion, which is value amplification. So if you look at, and I'll just close this up, if you look at Harlem, let's say, Harlem as an example, the Black Mecca, right? More or less these days, but the Black Mecca. There is a huge cultural impact that Harlem still has all around the world. That can be tokenized, that can be monetized, right? And that can be then cycled back into the community through digital tokens, their own digital currency. We've been talking about this for quite a while now. And that can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to be Harlem. Any community that has an intrinsic value within itself, that can be Greensboro, South Carolina. It can be anywhere. It can be Lagos. It can be anywhere. So that is what we're attempting to do, create extrusive platforms for communities to be able to monetize themselves, essentially. I think that's where all of this is going for me. So mass adoption is critical in the consumerist sense, but also in the community sense.
Yeah, you know, as a person who travels, I've been to over 70 countries, so I see a lot of potential in just, you know, I'm from Haiti, I go to Nigeria, and just being able to exchange and help others build wealth. But Olyanka, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, can this really bridge the wealth gap? Because I hear so many stories of people kind of concerned, like, I'm too behind, I can't get in right now. I mean, I just don't see it. Like, is there really an opportunity for folks to build wealth here?
To piggyback on what Rick said, mass adoption is important. Let's go back to, websites, right? The .com era, right? When that first started, you know, it was the techie or those who knew what this movement was about who latched on quicker. It didn't really become a worldwide phenomenon for everyone until a few years in. And by that time, people didn't really need to understand the back ends about, you know, the internet and how it's formed, et cetera, et cetera. It was just, this is it. This is the future. This is where we're moving towards. You got to get on board. And even with that, we left a few people behind. To this day, there are kids who are suffering because, you know, we're in the COVID era where they can't gain access to high-speed internet. So they can't continue their schooling, they're suffering and all these things. And it's very important to make sure our community is, you know, involved from the very beginning to just not just to invest, but to understand why this is important, how this will change the way that they do a lot of stuff going forward. And so one of the stuff, you know, this space is creating is the opportunity for education. A lot of people need to be educated on this. Businesses, companies, financial institutions, all kinds of industries are latching on to blockchain technology, not only, you know, the decentralized that we all know, but also the centralized aspect of creating their own, Apple related blockchain system, you know, and it's an opportunity for a new career change or to brush up on your knowledge about blockchain and how it's going to affect your particular industry, your particular profession, because it's going to affect it. So it's definitely a way for us to try to bridge that financial gap that we have, and by putting us as early adopters, putting us in the forefront of individuals who understand what this thing is, who understand the capabilities of this, you know, and the end result, the use cases. we have now a lot more financial institutions in 2021 than we did early 2020 who are using cryptocurrencies now. We have Cash App, we have PayPal, Visa announced end of last year, and now we know MasterCard is jumping on board. So it's like there's no going back. There's no days before blockchain. It's basically blockchain is the future. Now everything doesn't need to be on the blockchain transaction, distributed ledger. But however, a lot of companies are moving towards utilizing that technology. So therefore, we need to keep up with the pace, and we need to be at the forefront. We, meaning the Black community, need to be at the forefront of understanding what it is and how it's going to apply to us, not only in our business, but also personal life as well, because there's a supply chain aspect of, using blockchain to help track, the foods that we purchase at the grocery stores. There's the medical records, and Rick touched on owning your own data and being able to own your own medical record, and traveling. There's different aspects that could be a great use case. And one thing that I thought Nick was gonna highlight, and I believe he probably will, is the NFT craze that's going on in our community. And NFT is non-fungible tokens. In our community, we have a lot of artists, who have the know-it-all to create music, create art, create all kinds of stuff. And some of these people aren't making it big like Picasso, but within their own community, their name is familiar and is well known. So here's this aspect that you can actually transform your art into a token and gain value out of it. And so there's so many. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
There's so many use cases and so many opportunities for us to use this as a way to, close that financial gap.
Yeah. So as you said, it's here now. And Rick, I do want to hear from you. I think we jumped into talking about tokens, but we did not really define what these tokens are and all the opportunities with them. So maybe you can continue from what Erlenga's saying.
I mean, somebody asked a question here I can see, and this leads into it. So I want to try to answer that question quickly, and that's going to inform the answer to your question.
We're going to go to audience questions for sure.
Okay, somebody asked about tokens and taxation. Okay, so that's on a jurisdictional basis, right? America is different from Japan, which is different from China, which is different from Vietnam, which is different from Nigeria, which is different from most of Latin America, which is different from Central America, right? So right now there's no standardization for taxes, so it's kind of a free-for-all until that happens. And then they'll be more than likely happen just on a local basis, right? Like you're taxed locally for whatever else you do. So that then, to answer your question, Bitcoin and digital currencies are seen differently by different places. In Japan, it's a currency. It's a hard currency. You can go into a store and spend it, okay? Can't do that in Switzerland. You can do that in some states in America, some cities, some localities, some places in Latin America. Some places it's completely banned. Okay? So this thing is still very new, very nascent. But so tokens have value where it gains critical mass. So if you're going to control that, you've got to have 51% of those tokens, no matter what, okay? If you want to control the flow of those tokens. Now, NFTs, thank you, Oyenka. It's a really important topic because artists are a community. And I'll go back to my previous statement. Community value is going to be generated through these tokens. Now, non-fungible tokens simply say that you can't trade it. Non-fungible means you can't trade it, you can't spend it, but you can sell it to somebody else. So you look at the trustless contract that I mentioned before in a blockchain, along with the authentication, that corresponds directly with art, provenance, right? When was it made? Who's owned it? How much does it cost? What's the appreciation of value based on who's owned it? Blockchain does that really, really well, okay? Now, when you attach art assets, music, art, spoken word, anything, a book, right? Each time that changes hands, there's a transaction. Say, I sell my one-of-a-kind RIC book to Nancy. Nancy reads it. She goes, oh, that's great. I got a lot out of that. I'm going to sell it to Olenka because she needs to read it. 2 transactions. Okay? I get a piece of both of those transactions. Now, it empowers the originator, the content originator. And that's really the most important thing. Because once, as an artist, you sell a painting, gone, out of your hands. If you sell $10,000, it's worth $10 million next year, you don't see any of that $10 million. Okay? But if there's a trail, an accounting trail of every purchase, every transaction on that piece, now the blockchain will ensure in its own payment rails that I get that automatically through a smart contract, trustless contract. Automatically that value comes into my wallet with my cut of that sale. So now all of a sudden, you don't need agents. I mean, you may need an agent, but you don't need an accountant for it. The accountant's built into the sale, right? And again, paying taxes is depending on where you live.
Right.
So that's why, that NFT thing is super important. Right now, there's the crypto kitties and all kinds of stuff. It's getting much more serious, though.
It is.
It's getting more serious. I mean, I'm talking to fine artists, people making $1 million a piece for their work to actually put their stuff on blockchain now in various ways. Sometimes it's really hard. How are you going to put a statue on the blockchain, right? How do you tag it? Who's going to remove that tag, alter that tag? Is if you put the wrong information in, what if it's a forgery and you put the information in? So there are lots of different things that we have to sort out, but we are sorting them out on a daily basis. This is what I do in my company. We sort these issues out.
So I'm going to take it to some more audience questions. I know you picked up on that last one on taxation. One of the questions we have here is, have any of you folks heard or experienced folks buying homes with cryptocurrency?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yep. It depends if the seller will accept it.
Yeah.
That's easy. If the seller accepts Bitcoin, yachts have been bought, cars have been bought. Elon Musk takes Bitcoin.
Pizza has been bought.
Pizza, yeah, that's a famous story. Do you know the pizza story?
No, what is that one?
Somebody in the early days, won't mention who, I know people who know him actually, when Bitcoin was worth pennies, convinced a pizzeria to sell them 2 pizzas. And those 2 pizzas, and for what the cost of a pizza was, $12 a piece or whatever, give the hundreds of Bitcoin. And those 2 pizzas are worth millions and millions of dollars now. Most expensive pizzas ever made.
Yes.
Amazing. Actually, I'm here in Oakland, and they're taking cryptocurrency around the lake. So people who don't have their businesses, they're building pop-ups around the lake and accepting cryptocurrency to purchase goods. So it's definitely making its way around the world.
Yeah. There's an NFL, I forgot his name, but there's an NFL player who's taking part of his proceeds in crypto right now. And he's trying to push the league towards that for the rest of the players. And to piggyback on Rick, there is an artist, a Black artist. He's a former Major League Baseball player turn artist now, Makai Johnson. He just over the weekend just recently sold his pieces for over $1 million, as part of an NFT token. So, it's the use cases are definitely out here for us to tap into and to utilize. And it's just knowing how to get involved and how to structure it so that it benefits them. But yeah, royalties, etc. It's out here.
Even more so, Spencer Dinwiddie from the Brooklyn Nets, just about 18 months ago, came out. He tokenized his NBA contract, meaning he signed a contract with the Brooklyn Nets and then resold it on the marketplace like an IPO and tokenized it so people, the average person, could invest in his future and make dividends essentially on his NBA contract. So there are a lot of savvy people coming up in the community. This is happening, right?
Oh, that's, yeah.
But, that's it's a pretty out there concept. He didn't quite follow it through because COVID hit and a bunch of other things happened to forestall it. But the concept is now out there, and you're going to see more and more of that. So if I like the Nets and I like Dinwiddie, and I'm going to invest in his future, doesn't matter where he goes. Here's the beauty: no matter where he's traded for the rest of his career, or maybe even if it's added, I'm not sure if his endorsements are added into it, but if those endorsements are added into it, I get a piece of all of that, based on the fact that I have a piece of his contract.
Mm-hmm.
This takes us back to kind of the permanence that you guys were talking about. And I know there was some concern about, like, can this be stopped? But even the example Linka gave of Nigeria, you know, there are people still operating with this. It's already out there. So we'll take it to another audience question. The question is, how do you avoid coopting or colonization of alternative currencies?
Only 51%.
Yeah, the 51%. You know, wow. It's been more than 10 years now, right? And so this was something that came up, and the reason why Bitcoin started. Bitcoin was the way that we were all reintroduced to blockchain technology. Blockchain technology has always been out there, but it wasn't on a larger scale like it is now. So Bitcoin was created by Satoshi Nakamoto. And the reason why Satoshi created Bitcoin is because we had all just experienced a financial crisis, right? The financial stock market crash in 2008. And, you know, there was no one who was alive who did not have that affect them some kind of way. And it was a global financial crash, right? And so because of that, his intent was basically to make sure that we are removed from being susceptible to a financial crisis like that ever again. So his thought process was basically to decentralize our currencies. It was, you know, part of a white paper or something he created. He didn't really think that, you know, 10 plus years later that it was going to be this global phenomenon that people were going to latch onto. But here we are. And people are talking about there's a bubble in the stock market, et cetera, right now. But we now have this other means of currency that we're relying on that is just like, wow, someone created this because they didn't want us to fall back and experience what we did in the past. So just thinking about that and thinking about how the different type of use cases for Bitcoin at this point, you know, Argentina with their currency having severely been undervalued and, you know, to the point of where it just seems like there's no return, they're relying on Bitcoin as a form of currency. So it's more than just the US. You know, and we really need to step back and think about that, because a lot of the times when you hear about the craze, people keep thinking, you know, it's only isolated to just us. It's not just us. This is something that's being used all over the world. And I believe, you know, like Rick mentioned, that, you know, depending on where you are, what region, what country, it has a different value and connotation to it. Mm-hmm. In the US, you know, we want the financial institutions, we want everybody to be all into, you know, cryptocurrency. But in other countries, this is their means, this is their livelihood, the way of living. And then, you know, in Nigeria, it was part of the NSARS movement that, you know, the government has shut down the bank and there was no ways of them getting their Naira. So, you know, people had to rely on Bitcoin to help the movement go forward. So this is a lot, you know, a lot more than just a currency, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can talk about Venezuela too. You know, Argentina, I know, I can tell you for a fact, the way you got money out of Argentina before Bitcoin was taking suitcases of money across the border. And if you were lucky, you got away with that. Mm-hmm. If you had enough money to pay people off, you got away with that. They went to Bitcoin early. By 2014, they were moving money across the border in Argentina with Bitcoin. So I would say that the US, you know, to take Olenka's point just a tad further, is behind the curve on digital currencies. We are not, you know, we have this thing about our American exceptionalism. So we can talk about our education, which, you know, is not as high as we may think it is as a country, but also our economic policies aren't as robust as we think they are, especially not when it comes to technology like Bitcoin. There are countries much more advanced than we are and moving much forward in ways that our antiquated banking systems, like our antiquated, water pipes or telephone lines, can't catch up with. I mean, look at Africa is a mobile-first continent, essentially. Why? Because they didn't have phones, they didn't have landlines in the population. So they went straight to mobile, like they're going in many ways straight to digital currency. Because of a lack of infrastructure, turns out to be a blessing. It's called the leapfrog effect.
Can I ask you, Riss, one of the audience questions, and I kind of mentioned this kind of earlier, is there still time at this point? Some people are like, not sure if it's a good idea to come in, because the question here is, what are your thoughts on the fact that Bitcoins continue to dip? I quote continuing here, but the price eventually getting to 100K by the end of the year and potentially getting to 500K in 2 to 5 years. What are your thoughts about that?
Olinka, do you mind if I take this out of turn? Do you mind?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I need to answer this. I need to answer this. Okay. Think of Bitcoin as the Model T Ford of digital currencies. Okay. The Ferraris and the Teslas have yet to be built. Nobody makes Model T Fords anymore. Okay. Whether Bitcoin lives or dies is a moot point. You can ride the curve if you want to. No one knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is, man, woman, or group. Could be a 14-year-old. It could be anybody, okay? So, or anything. It could be a robot. So the value system that it's espousing essentially is anti-statist, meaning tear down barriers, tear down banks, all that stuff. That's great. That's the philosophy behind Bitcoin. There is a philosophy behind Bitcoin. And the early adopters were anarchists and libertarians.
Yes.
There's a heavy right-wing extremist thread within Bitcoin. Believe it, okay? But that's who started this. So understanding that, the idea is to create your own value. We can take a lesson from this. We have the technology, thanks to people like Olinka and other educators in the space, who are also consulting and educating and bringing women, children, men into the fold to learn and produce. Okay, don't just sit back and just take what you see. Make something. Express one's own value. That's the opportunity that we have with this. And if that's lost, it doesn't matter what digital currency's out there, we won't be on top of it.
And so, in saying that, what do you think about the growth potential at this point of Bitcoin?
Doesn't matter. It can go to $1 million. But it isn't too late to get into it. Look, I won't be so pessimistic. Sorry, I tend to be a little bit sardonic about this stuff. But go on and buy some. Go on and buy whatever, however much you can afford. Go buy it. Learn from your investment. Test the waters. Play with it. Trade it some. Get to know other digital currencies as well. Get to know the philosophies behind the different tokens, and then you're prepared to play in this space. Buying Bitcoin is great. Bitcoin could fall apart in a day, okay? It's extremely volatile. Understand that you're investing in an extremely volatile asset that could be dictated out of Beijing very easily. 4 times in Bitcoin's life, it's been canceled by the Chinese government. Each time there was a massive dip, right? And then they said, oh, we just want to learn what was going on. It's okay again, it's legal, and it went back up. If China were to outlaw Bitcoin tomorrow, these $50,000+ gains are down the toilet. They might not. Take a shot. But don't ever, I'm not an investment counselor, so don't take my word for it, but I would never personally invest more than I can afford to invest. But I would, if I wanted to learn about something, I would invest something to see what it was about and to understand the dynamics in the space.
And Olinka, I think you were about to say something about that, but I'm wondering, what does this mean about Black women? Why blockchain and Black women? Can you talk about that as well?
Yeah, so I created Black Women Blockchain Council back in 2018 because I felt like there was a need for Black women to be involved in this space. We are showcasing and promoting the different type of Black women who are working on different type of projects in the blockchain technology, as well as we're educating our communities to make sure that they are provided with awareness, as well as ways and opportunities to be able to invest in these cryptocurrencies or other projects that other Black women are involved in. Our biggest thing is making sure that we're not left behind, right? We've spent the past 30 plus minutes talking about how this is where we are and this is where we're going, talking about the projection of the future and wanting to make sure that our community does not get left behind. It's very important to me because I'm in the STEM industry. And in STEM, we've ran into a situation where we're trying to create something for the future like AI and realizing that that's not 100%, feasible for everybody in some regard. And so we need to make sure that this space is inclusive if we're going to create the future. And piggybacking on what Rick said about Bitcoin, I don't necessarily believe that it's going to go to zero. I do agree that Asia seems to be more involved in it. In certain places in Singapore, you could purchase, you could go to Burger King and purchase, all kinds of fast food with Bitcoin, their cryptocurrencies, period. But in the US is a different dynamic. However, also in Africa, there's a different dynamic there too. And so I think the value, as I mentioned before, it's definitely different depending on where you are. And that value is strong enough for it to keep making sure that the currency goes up. I don't know where it's going to go. I didn't really think it was going to hit 50,000 earlier this year. And here we are. So, and we're only in February. So there's a likely chance, that it could hit $100,000. And, that might be a near future. And the fact that it's going, and that's the thing about cryptocurrency, it will go up and everybody wants to jump in. But when you're investing in stuff, and we in the US think of it as an investment, when you're investing in stuff, you always want to buy low, sell high, right? And so when people are all rushing in when it's really at $50,000 or 40-something thousand dollars, as opposed to when it was at $100 and nobody was paying attention to it. There's a big difference. And I tend to sit back and just laugh at people because I'm like, it's still investment. There's a likely chance that it might go down. And like Rich said, it's speculative. We're not giving investment advice here, but the way the things are going now, if you own just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, at least you're in the game. Your skin is in the game, right? And so you can see the value of that money go up and down. And apps like Cash App or PayPal or even Robinhood, whatever, allows you to play with your crypto. You don't actually own the crypto, but you get the sense that you're in it. And if you really want to own it, then you will go to an exchange and actually purchase it. But you don't have to purchase it at 50,000. You could put $100 into it just to own a certain amount, and look away. Maybe 5 years, that $100 might be like $5,000. There and it has happened to a lot of people where back in the day, they probably got it because they mined something for a second and then they got bored and then went back and checked their wallet and saw that money has significantly increased. So it's very important just to be in it. You don't have to be in it significantly, and definitely don't invest, your livelihood into it, and understand the concept behind it. And that's what we teach at BWBC, Black Women Blockchain Council, is to make sure that we understand what's going on and what it is, so that you can have a little bit more value. You can attach a little bit more value to it.
Olenka, can you tell us what you mentioned in exchange, but what are these entry points for this? And I know Rick also mentioned that you don't have to invest all of it. They see these large numbers, but you can buy
Yes,
literally $1 worth of it if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
talk about that.
So the exchanges are like Coinbase. Everybody heard of Coinbase. Gemini is another exchange. There's an eToro exchange, and Binance US is an exchange. There's a Binance, which is China-based, and then there's a US version that US residents can invest in. And these are kind of like, if you think about it like a brokerage account, they're similar to that, where you can actually own the value or your cryptocurrency. And then there's, apps like Cash Apps and PayPal, Cash Apps and Robinhood, where you don't really own. And when I say own means you're able to take the cryptocurrency off of the exchange, put it into a wallet, or transfer it somewhere else, and it's literally yours. There's a private key and a public key that's attached to it, and it's yours. When you purchase it from Robinhood, it's more like a storage, and they own it, but you get a stake in it, I guess. And so you can't take that unless you basically convert it back to the fiat. It's really not yours as an actual cryptocurrency off of those apps. And so that's the difference between the two. However, if this is your first time getting in, just get in. If you get in as buying, $10 worth of Bitcoin off a Cash App or PayPal, then you have $10 worth of Bitcoin. Tomorrow, it might be $25 worth, just get in. Definitely not an investment advice, but understand what you're investing in before you go full in.
Okay. And Rick, I have another question for you that I see up here about, is this currency protected from hackers and thieves? I think you addressed it a little bit earlier, but it sounds like something that's still something that folks want to understand.
It depends on if it's a decentralized blockchain. Yes, the actual code is protected against hackers and thieves. However, the vulnerability points are the access points, like your phone and the exchanges. Okay, so when you make that handshake, that connection between your phone and your wallet, or the wallet and an exchange, that's where hackers can come in. So common sense, don't answer phone numbers you don't know, don't get SIM jacked. If you have two-factor authentication, don't be silly, take all precautions, put a VPN on your phone and on your laptop. Take whatever precaution, get Kaspersky software or Norton, get whatever you have to do to protect yourself, because once you lose access to your Bitcoin wallet, you have lost your Bitcoin forever. It's not coming back. There is no FDIC. There's no federal insurance like a bank has to give you your money back if it gets stolen from the bank. You're just out, right? So you have to take, at this point in time, in technology, you have to be very, very careful. People are working on this, all day, every day, but digital communications are inherently porous, right? They're inherently hackable. Anything that can be made digitally on the internet right now is hackable, period, anything.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful.
So last question I have here, maybe you can talk more broadly about other forms of cryptocurrency, but the question is, have any of you heard of Guap Coin? This is a currency founded by a Black woman. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've heard of Guap Coin by Tavonia Evans. Tavonia used to be one of the original board member of Black Women Blockchain Council. And the coin is basically to give back to the community, like Rick mentioned earlier on about Brooklyn and different areas, Black communities owning their own cryptocurrency so that they can have the money circulate within the community. So Guap Coin, the intention is to have the money circulate within our community. And, it's been gaining traction. Tavonia has been working on this. She's a software engineer who has a really great understanding of blockchain. And she's been doing a very good job of promoting this. And I think it's, one of those avenues that we as a community should start thinking about latching onto as a project, because, the intention is to create wealth within our community and make sure that the money circulates within our community. So I commend her for the work that she's put into Guap Coin.
And Rick, do you have maybe any comments on that or other coins? Because I know everyone's talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum, but what are your ideals around that?
I'm familiar with Guap coin, and as you know, as I've already stated, I'm all for that concept. I'm all about that. So yes, look her up, do your thing, can contribute, support, make it happen. There are other things happening as well. In Africa, there's Ubuntu coin, right? Mm-hmm. Which is gold backed. So the CEO, Mamadou Touré, I'm full disclosure, I'm on the advisory board of Ubuntu. So I'm not trying to shill for them, but I just want people to know what's out there. There are other gold-backed tokens as well. But in the case of Ubuntu, there are contracts with gold mines, and that gold is actually sitting in vaults sometimes or in the ground in some cases. And the currency is backed by those gold deposits, be they in or out of the ground. So that is the same as the US dollar used to be, right? Backed by gold. Now we're not anymore, of course, and haven't been since the 70s. But that is the general, idea behind currency, is that it's backed by something tangible that people want. So Ubuntu, look into that. Look into any. I would say that Akon is doing some interesting things also. Yeah. But he's incorporating. He's doing what Luxembourg is trying to do, actually, which to me is fascinating. To create a smart city with its own digital currency, right, in Africa. So just think about Wakanda. He's trying to build Wakanda, basically. I love it. I'm with it, and I love what he's doing. But we need more thinking like that, and we need to, as a group, be more cognizant of those kinds of things. It really is about doing the research. We got the web. We have the whole Library of Alexandria at our fingertips. So just go out there and take a look and see what's up, because there are a lot of people doing a lot of things, and if we support what resonates with us, be it a community currency, be it a Pan-African currency, or anything else, then it's time to learn, time to understand.
Okay. And, there is a last question. I'm going to see if you folks can answer it in like 30 seconds, because it's a big one. And the first part of it is, we don't hear much about mining anymore. Can anyone speak to the difference opportunities in mining crypto as opposed to already acquiring it? And then the other part of it is, can anyone speak to what factors control how coin is valued and devalued in the current marketplace, and what factors control those swings? Like, is it strictly government leniency and people's willingness to purchase? So I know I squeezed in two questions there, but one is, what about this mining? And the other one, is it really strictly on government leniency?
So mining, it depends on what cryptocurrency, right? If you're thinking about mining Bitcoin, the required power to mine Bitcoin is
very
significant. So I'm not sure if someone is willing to do that in the US, given how much it costs, the energy supplies. It really depends on your location when it comes down to mining. Back in the day, it used to be really lucrative, especially for a miner to mine Bitcoin, because they first few years, individuals actually got 1 Bitcoin. So people did create wealth off of mining Bitcoins. But if that's something that you're interested in and you're all into programming and coding and all that good stuff, then definitely look into it, but also know that there's, costs associated with it, because you're going to have to get the right type of equipment, et cetera, to mine. And, your energy usage will go sky high. So it's expensive.
I'm sorry. I just want to get quickly. If you want to mine, go online, look for a token that has a philosophy behind it that you support, get in early on it, and mine it. There are different kind of miners out there. The equipment, you'll find it. It's not hard to source, and it's fairly cheap if you're in early. Okay, that's the first thing. What was the second part?
Oh, do we have time? I want to be respectful of both of your times. Okay, so this last one was, can anyone speak to what factors control how coin is valued and devalued in the current marketplace, and what factors control those swings? And is it strictly based on government leniency and people's willingness to purchase? I feel like this is Sort of simple the answer, but you know.
It's a stock market. It's innuendo, it's rumor, it's regulation, it's scarcity, and how people play with those things. It's the exact same problem.
Yeah, it's everything and nothing.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Right? It depends on, what cryptocurrency you're talking about. We're going to use Bitcoin as an example, and, it's a global currency, and, it depends on which region has the most amount of people using it. If they all decide to take out their money at the same time, it will devalue it. There's money being shifted right now, and you could actually monitor that information. So, when people say that it's dark web money and it's, used for nefarious reasons, et cetera, you can actually trace the transaction and see where it's coming from, where it's going, et cetera. So there's significant money being moved back and forth, et cetera. So yeah, it's everything and nothing at the same time. Like there's no tangible way for us to say, hey, if this happens, we know that it's going to go down. It's just left in the wind.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. We're going to close this conversation because I know people get other things as well. But this was a great conversation. I know we're probably going to need another part to this. I definitely learned a lot today, and it was so timely and important for us in general to have this conversation, especially for the Black community. Some of the takeaways I got is that it's not too late to get in. You can go in and play with it right now, that this is not going anywhere, and so this is just out in the wind, and that this is something that can actually bridge some of the wealth within our own community, the gaps. And so I thank you, Rick and Olinka, for this conversation, and thank all our guests for joining us tonight. Yes, and please join us on March 11th at 4 p.m. EST for our next conversation with Judy Samuelson. That's the founder and executive director of the Aspen Institute Business and Societies Program and author of the 6 New Rules of Business, Creating Real Value in the Changing World. And in April, we will have an actor, activist, and entrepreneur, Terry Crews, be with us. So be sure to visit cultureshiftLabs.com. That's cultureshiftLabs.com for more information on their diversity, inclusion, and racial equality solutions. Be safe out there, and we will see you next month. Thanks, everyone.